This is the RC4WD R2 Dig transmission. Here are the part numbers in case you want them. They also make a black version. This one here is the non-dig version, R2 transmission version 2, and those are the part numbers if you need them. I bought this one for my JK build because it was the only one that was short enough to fit in without modifying the interior. The dig transmissions were designed for rock crawlers so they could disconnect the rear axle and use the front axle to dig around on a tighter turn radius. But I started thinking, what if I turn it around backwards and used it to disconnect the front drive shaft and make a two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive selectable transmission like a full-scale truck has. I put together this gear ratio chart for the R2 transmission. It should cover all of them except for the 1-to-1 version. You can use an 8-tooth pinion gear all the way up to a 20-tooth pinion gear in this transmission. So just to compare with a stock Axial SCX10 transmission with an 87-tooth spur and a 20-tooth pinion gear, that's 11.31 to 1. Now this transmission with a 20-tooth pinion gear is 12.15 to 1. So that'd be pretty close, but you can see if you went to the 8-tooth pinion gear, it'd be 30.375 to 1. That's the real low rock crawling gear there. RC4WD also makes the R2 tranny conversion plate for the Axial SCX10 trucks. There's the part numbers there if you need them. Now the mounting holes on the R2 conversion plate are offset, so you can basically put the transmission in 4 different positions if you spin that mount around, or spin the transmission around. That came in real handy for what I wanted to do here. They also make a sideway servo mount kit for this transmission, but I was a little bit surprised the mount, when you put it on, it leaves a hole here for the opening of the gear, so dirt would be able to get in there, right in that hole, and it didn't seem very good to me. You could probably cut out a thin piece of sheet aluminum that could cover that hole, that you could fit in between that mount and the transmission, sandwich it in between there. But what I wound up doing was taking a piece of angle aluminum and making a whole new mount for it, which was a lot of extra work, and if I had it to do over again, I would have just made a little piece of metal to sandwich in between there. Here's the mount I made finished up. You can see it fits over and covers that hole completely now, so no dirt will get in. It was just a lot of extra work. This is what the transmission looks like on the inside, a series of gears on 3 different shafts. It's a nice simple design. This black version 2 transmission has an upgraded hole to fit the larger size gears into. Now this older Dig transmission has a smaller hole that won't fit the larger gears, so I'm going to upgrade it to the larger size hole. I'm going to use this new transmission as a template to mark the old one in order to enlarge the hole. If you don't have the new transmission to use as a guide, just enlarge the hole big enough to fit the gear you're using. So I just took the side cover from the old transmission and slid it on the output shaft of the new transmission, and I'm just going to scribe the hole that I want to cut out. Alright, so I'm just marking the hole on the side cover, and that'll be used as the guide to Dremel out that hole the size I want it to be. Okay, I've enlarged the hole to match the version 2 transmission, so now I can run the larger gears in there. I filed a flat spot on the shift work shaft so that the set screw on the shift lever collar would have a place to seat. I also ground a flat spot on the shift lever collar on the side closest to the output shaft to make clearance for the drive shaft because it would have hit otherwise. They do give you an output shaft extender, but that would mean I'd have to use even a shorter drive shaft and worse angles, so I didn't use the extender. I just ground down the collar, and you can see it fits nice like that. When trying to adjust the motor, one of the screws that holds the side cover on was hitting the top of the motor where it moves back and forth. So I used one of these tiny little RC4WD scale miniature hex bolts, which have a really small bolt head on them, and it made enough room for the motor to pivot back and forth. There's the part numbers for the bolts. I wound up using a 25mm set screw to hold this collar on, because if you just used a bolt, it wouldn't have the right length to compress everything in there and hold the collar on at the same time, because there's pieces in between that you need to bolt on. So just a nut on the end of that would be better for compressing everything. I also ground the spacer to match the collar so it would seat better. Alright, we got the RC4WD conversion plate in there for the R2 transmission, the Delrin plate. Spared you all the curse words and the screaming. Did it off camera. Had to separate one half of the frame and try not to take apart the whole truck because I didn't want to disassemble everything. There's the bare transmission in the truck. You can see it fits in pretty good. There's plenty of room for the motor and all the other things. That's it complete with the servo and the motor and the shift linkage in there. And this is just an overall view of everything when it's finished up so you can see how it all fits in. You can see I put some short button head screws in the sides of the transmission to fill the mounting holes that weren't used so dirt won't get into the transmission. I used 3x6mm button head screws, but be careful because one of them was trying to hit a gear when I put it in there, so I ground it a little bit shorter so it wouldn't hit, so just watch out for that. Alright, I got the drive shafts bolted in and everything hooked up now. We can try it out. Let's try it in two-wheel drive first. I had to use a different drive shaft in the front. I had to use a RC4WD Mega shaft because they have really good pivot angles. You can get a lot more angle on those as you can than you can with the stock drive shafts or these Junfax, which are basically the same angles as a stock shaft except for the metal. Alright, because this front section, obviously your normal transmission is about this wide, so the drive shaft would be way over here and you wouldn't have as much of an angle. But this front section adds, more length to it, so the drive shaft is shorter and it's on a greater angle. So that's the reason you need drive shafts that can get better angles. The front anyway. The rear was fine with the stock drive shaft or this Junfac that's in there now.